Hello and welcome back to the Nurse Ratchet podcast. I am still solo because it's literally the same day. Olivia shall return, I hope, at some stage. I hope she returns. But for now, we are still flying solo on this Erin Patterson case. Today, we're going to go into the nitty-gritty of the trial and Erin Patterson taking the stand and her subsequent cross-examination, which was spicy. There is no updates from the last update. It is literally the same day. I still have children surrounding me and harassing me while I'm trying to record this podcast. So, well, we're not here to fuck spiders, so let's just jump into it, shall we? Rightio, so Erin Patterson takes the stand in a moment that surprised many in the courtroom. It was unknown whether she was going to do this, whether the defence would call her, because they are literally the only ones who can do that. Like, the prosecution can't call the defendant, but they can cross-examine her. Her testimony gave a window into her life in 2023, the challenges, the dreams, and the fractures beneath the surface. She described her children starting at a new school, living with her full-time but still spending weekends with their father, Simon, under a relatively smooth co-parenting arrangement. Erin had planned to study nursing, but put it on hold to support her daughter. She spoke warmly about her dream, quote-unquote, forever home in Leongatha, designed by her in Microsoft Paint, apparently, lovingly built despite structural doubts. Photos from the trial showed a house filled with Lego and spaces made for her kids. But Erin's relationship with Simon had quietly deteriorated. While the logistics of parenting and family life functioned, the warmth was gone. She also felt increasingly distanced from Simon's family, especially after being excluded from events like Gail's birthday. Erin was candid about her struggles with self-esteem and health, even considering gastric bypass surgery. Erin reminisced about her story beginning in the early 2000s when she and Simon moved from friendship to romance. Religion unexpectedly shaped their path. Erin referred to herself as a quote-unquote fundamentalist atheist, and she found herself converted after attending a sermon at the church where Ian Wilkinson, later a survivor of the fatal lunch, was the pastor. Erin and Simon married in 2007 at the Currumbara Anglican Church, not Ian's church, as many expected, but chosen so Ian could enjoy the day without working. Erin's own parents were absent, travelling to Russia apparently, but Don and Gail, Simon's parents, became like her own family. Shortly after marriage, they sold Simon's car, bought a four-wheel drive and travelled across Australia before settling in Perth. Simon loved adventure, but Erin was ready to start a family. In Jan 2009, Erin gave birth to a son in a traumatic delivery that ended in an emergency C-section. The baby needed tube feeding, and Erin's own recovery was slow. Despite medical advice to stay in hospital, she and Simon left early to be together at home. This was not an isolated incident. Erin had also discharged herself, as we know, against advice during a later hospital stay for gastroenteritis after the lunch. Don and Gail provided crucial support during Erin's early motherhood, teaching her how to care for her son and encourage her to relax and enjoy the experience. The family rented a bigger home in Perth so Don and Gail could stay. Despite a rough start, the baby thrived, and Simon convinced Erin to take another road trip, this time with their 3-month-old son, across WA and northern Queensland. Erin found the trip manageable, but eventually returned to Perth alone, marking the start of the separation. They say the test of a lasting relationship is to either travel together or assemble a flat pack together. Obviously, they didn't get to the flat pack. Anyway, they travelled apart for several months with strained communication, yet made efforts to shield their son from their difficulties. As I stated earlier, many people asked if calling Erin to the stand meant both sides could question her. Indeed, while risky, the defence's choice showed Erin's determination to tell her own story. The next day in court began with Erin Patterson's financial situation coming under the spotlight. This was all led by Colin Mandy. She revealed that she had generously loaned around $400,000 each to several of her estranged husband Simon Patterson's siblings. Generous much? Loans that were interest-free and repayable only against inflation. This generosity wasn't just about money. Erin explained she hoped it might help keep the family connected despite the separation. Erin's finances came from an inheritance she received after her grandmother passed away and later after her mother died in 2019. She used this inheritance to invest in properties, including the block in Leongatha, where she built her dream home, and a house in Mount Waverley. Interestingly, she kept these properties in Simon's name, even though they had been separated for 4 years. Erin said she did this because she still believed there might be a future together, a gesture of hope and family unity. There's a trigger warning for this next part because we talk about eating disorders. But money was only part of Erin's story. She also opened up about her lifelong struggle with body image and eating disorders, issues that began in her teenage years. She described a strict upbringing where her mother weighed her and her sister weekly to prevent weight gain. Erin shared how she moved from extreme food restriction to binge eating in adulthood. By 2023, her challenges with food had worsened. She described episodes of eating and then purging multiple times a week. Her health anxiety extended beyond eating. Erin told the court about a deep mistrust of doctors and the medical system that grew after repeated dismissals of her concerns. For example, when her daughter was 8 months old and had an ovarian mass causing pain, Erin said medical staff didn't believe her observations. She described feeling vulnerable and scared, especially after a traumatic birth with her son involving an emergency C-section and feeding struggles. There was even an event when her son was injured and the wrong side of his body was x-rayed, a mistake that shook her confidence in medical professionals. Unfortunate, but can happen. This history of distrust helps explain why Erin discharged herself from hospital in July 2023 against medical advice. Convenient? Maybe. Even though others from the lunch were seriously ill. Adding to her stress were tensions with Simon and his family. Erin recounted disputes over child support payments and feeling excluded from family events. She shared candid messages from private Facebook groups where she vented frustrations about her in-laws in strong language. Words she later regretted but said gave her a rare outlet to feel heard and supported. Amid this turmoil, Erin had revealed a surprising passion: mushroom foraging. She explained how during the boredom of the COVID-19 lockdowns in 2020, she began exploring local parks and walking trails with her children, discovering wild mushrooms on properties in Korumburra and Leongatha. Erin described collecting mainly field and horse mushrooms and experimenting with cooking them. She carefully researched each type online before tasting, starting with small slices cooked in butter. If she felt fine, she included them in the meals. I mean, bit of a risk, don't you think, Erin? God damn. Finally chopped so her children would not notice, apparently. Using mushrooms from local foraging as well as purchased ones from Woolworths and Asian grocers near her Melbourne home in Glen Waverley. To preserve mushrooms beyond their short season, Erin bought a dehydrator in April 2023 and experimented with drying mushrooms, storing them in Tupperware containers in her pantry. Photos shown in court revealed this keen interest. Mushrooms laid out on trays and digital scales, a glimpse of a hobby that became central to the case. The day ended with Erin acknowledging her mushroom foraging and cooking habits, setting the stage for the tragic events that followed. This testimony gave insight into the complexities behind the fatal lunch: financial generosity, fractured family ties, health fears, and a culinary curiosity with devastating consequences. Erin describes using the mushrooms in the Wellington due to it tasting a bit bland. She washed and strained the mushrooms she bought from the Asian grocer, chopped them up, and put them in the duxelle that she used to make the beef Wellington. She described the reason for the individual beef Wellingtons because she couldn't find a log of eye fillet. She could only find individual eye fillets, and that explained the increased amount of puff pastry also. She purchased 3 kilograms of puff pastry. She admits that the mushrooms may have been foraged mushrooms, used instead of the mushrooms purchased from Asian grocers, and that she possibly made a mistake in putting them in there, thinking that they were the store-bought mushrooms. In regards to the dinner plates, she stated she used the dinner plates that she had, and she said she didn't own grey plates, but she didn't remember what colour plate she ate from, contrary to Ian Wilkinson's evidence. Erin stated she ate about a third of her meal as she was talking and not eating much. In regards to her lies, Erin admitted the cancer diagnosis was a lie, and she kept the lie going because she was seeking compassion from her in-laws. She was going to raise the gastric bypass surgery as the original discussion. But in the moment, she felt embarrassed, so she went with the cancer story to gain their advice on how to talk to the children about surgery. Erin stated as she was cleaning up, she ate a lot of the leftover cake from the lunch dessert. And then she went and threw it all up, not because she felt ill from the mushrooms, but because of her eating disorder. The implication being that she later did not become as sick, possibly because she threw up the beef Wellington as well. Erin stated she got diarrhea on the Saturday night with abdominal cramps regardless. She was needing the toilet every 20 minutes, apparently. Despite that, she did not go to the hospital until later, and she made the decision to drive her son all the way into Melbourne in order for him to attend his flying lesson. She reported needing to go to the toilet on the trip and that she stopped on the side of the road to do a poo. She put her human waste in a dog poo bag, according to her, and disposed of it in the gas station toilets, which is caught on CCTV. It shows Erin going into the toilets for 9 minutes and coming out and then purchasing a few things. That's why she spent a small amount of time in there, according to her. She then went to the hospital on Monday after dropping the kids off. She had a history of distrust of the medical profession, as we've previously said. So when she arrived and Dr. Chris Webster said to her that they'd been expecting her, this threw her, as she was shocked at the death cap mushroom suspicion in the beef Wellington. She wanted to leave and organise things at home if they wanted her to stay overnight. So she went home, organised the animals, packed a bag for her daughter, who had an afternoon ballet session, and then returned to the hospital. Whilst in hospital, she mentioned she had a headache and diarrhea. She was given some fentanyl. She was transferred to Melbourne for care. She talked to a child protection worker whilst she was there. She talked to Simon, who asked her about the food dehydrator, stating, quote, "Is that what you poisoned my parents with?" end quote. And she states that that's when the penny dropped for her and that she might be blamed for this. She started to worry child protection would take her children, so that is why she took the dehydrator to the tip upon returning home. She was pressed on why she didn't tell people her fears. At the time, she stated she was stressed and scared. Erin's phones were reset and her SIM cards were exchanged. Erin's explanation for this was that she wanted to change her number because she was scared of how Simon was accusing her of poisoning his parents. She had 3 phones. Phone A was missing. According to Erin, phone B was hers, but her son damaged his phone, so he took over her phone and did a factory reset. He used it until the 19th of May and then dropped it in a puddle, so she took it back and put it in a drawer somewhere. In August, she was using another phone that wasn't working for her, so she took out the old phone and did another factory reset on it in order to start using it again. She started changing her contacts on that phone due to Simon's behaviour after the lunch. The last reset she did while the police were at her house was because she admits she did panic, because she didn't want the police to see the pictures of mushrooms on the phone, so she reset it while they were there. She then did a factory reset remotely for the same reasons. She was scared. She had a third phone that they did not take in the search. She states being surprised they didn't take that one. In regards to the iNaturalist website, she denied she ever foraged for death cap mushrooms or ever seeing the iNaturalist website stating they were growing in Loch. After 3 days on the stand, Erin Patterson finally faced the moment everyone in the courtroom had been waiting for, the cross-examination by Crown Prosecutor Dr. Nanette Rogers. The morning began with the final round of questions from Eric's own defence barrister, Colin Mandy SC. He led her through a kind of checklist, what felt like a curated summary of the key points he wanted burned into the jury's mind. He returned to the dehydrator, the one Erin admitted to dumping at the local tip just days after the family's fatal lunch. She acknowledged lying to the police about owning it, admitted she'd panicked, and described her actions as a stupid, knee-jerk reaction born out of fear. She also admitted lying about foraging for mushrooms. Then came a tightly structured line of rapid-fire questioning from Colin Mandy. Did all 5 beef Wellingtons have the same filling? Yes. Did you pretend to be sick? No. Did you intentionally pick or serve death cap mushrooms? No. And most critically, did you intend to kill or harm Don Patterson, Gail Patterson, Heather Wilkinson, Ian Wilkinson? Her voice apparently wavered as she answered each. No. By the end, her words were barely above a whisper. But that emotional moment didn't linger for too long. No sooner had Mandy taken his seat than Dr. Nanette Rogers rose from the prosecution bench like a spring-loaded trap, immediately launching into her questions. She began with the dehydrator again, challenging Erin with images, timestamps, fingerprints. Then she moved to the heart of the case. Where exactly did the mushrooms come from? Rogers put it to Erin that she'd seen a post on iNaturalist about death cap mushrooms in Loch, shared by Kristen McKenzie on April 18th, 2023. 10 days later, Rogers said Erin went to lock. Kristen McKenzie was a mushroom enthusiast. Erin denied both allegations. Then came the photos. Close-ups of mushrooms drying on trays in a dehydrator, right there on Erin's kitchen bench. Mushroom expert Dr. Tom May had already told the court he believed, with a high degree of confidence, that those mushrooms were Amanita Phalloides, death caps. Erin admitted the photos were taken in her home, but she rejected the claim that they were death caps and flatly denied weighing them in order to calculate a lethal dose. She also confirmed she would have served a portion to her ex-husband Simon had he shown up for the day, but not with the intention of harming him. The prosecution pressed on. Rogers brought up Erin's foraging history. Erin said she'd picked mushrooms in various places near Leongatha, her property on Gibson Street, the Botanic Gardens of Corumburra, the local rail trail, all sometime after April 28th, the day she purchased the dehydrator. And that was significant because it was the first time the prosecution had explicitly stated their theory that Erin had gone to Lock to collect the death caps. Then came what the prosecution dubbed the cancer lie. We already knew Ian Wilkinson, the only survivor of the lunch, told the court Erin had claimed to have cancer that day and was seeking advice on how to tell her children. But Erin told a different story. She said she never claimed to have a diagnosis, just that she'd been undergoing tests for ovarian cancer and might need treatment. She admitted she'd once complained of pain in her elbow, told Don and Gail Patterson she was concerned, then kept the story going after the pain resolved because she liked the care and compassion it brought from them. Dr. Rogers didn't accept that. She grilled Erin on her internet searches, images and articles about ovarian and brain cancer symptoms, stages. Rogers argued Erin had been gathering details to make her lie more convincing. Erin said the searches dated back to 2021 or 2022 and denied using them to concoct a story. The line of questioning grew more personal. Rogers questioned Erin about conversations she'd had with healthcare workers and hospital staff after the poisonings. Why hadn't she told them she'd foraged for mushrooms, if she had? Erin's defence. Those staff were asking whether there were foraged mushrooms in the meal, and at that time she didn't believe there were. Then came the Facebook messages. Earlier in the trial, Erin's messages to friends had surfaced, messages expressing her frustrations with her in-laws, particularly around their refusal to take sides in the family disputes. Some messages included eye roll emojis and a flat mouth emoji. I like to call that one the unimpressed emoji, which the prosecution argued mocked Don and Gail's suggestion to pray for the children. Erin denied this, saying she was frustrated, not mocking, and that emojis are open to interpretation. Rogers went a step further, suggesting Erin had told one of the women in the chat that she was an atheist. Erin denied that too. She said that despite chatting with these women for years, there were still things she'd never discussed, including her faith. By the end of the day, the courtroom had sat through hours of emotional testimony, forensic questioning, and an ever-thickening tangle of conflicting narratives. The jury now faces a monumental task, sifting through lies, half-truths, and genuine grief to determine whether Erin Patterson's version of events holds any weight at all. Rogers suggested Erin had a particular interest in the site, had searched it intentionally, and navigated through global maps to locate mushroom sightings in specific areas like Moorabbin. Erin disagreed, repeatedly saying she didn't remember ever using the site. The prosecution wasn't letting up. Dr. Rogers pushed harder. Did someone else in her household use it then? Erin replied, I don't know. Again and again, her memory apparently was full of holes. Then circled back to a different stand in Erin's story. The alleged gastric bypass surgery. If you remember, she told the jury she lied to her lunch guests about having cancer because she needed a cover story for an upcoming medical procedure, the bypass. She named a clinic in Rich in South Yarra as the place she booked in for a pre-assessment, but under cross-examination that claim began to unravel. Dr. Rogers bought the receipts. Yes, Erin had an appointment for the 13th of September, but it had been cancelled 2 days earlier, and the Enrich Clinic, according to the prosecutor, they didn't perform gastric bypass or sleeve surgeries. Erin's response? Vague at best. She thought maybe it was a different procedure, maybe liposuction. She said she couldn't really remember. But then came a much more personal line of questioning. Erin had previously told court about her history of disordered eating, that after the infamous lunch, she'd gone home and eaten most of the leftover cake, 2/3, maybe 3/4 of it, and then made herself vomit. Rogers went straight for the implications. Did that vomit include the beef Wellington? Erin said she didn't know. Rogers pressed her. How could she not know? Erin shot back that it is vomit, unless you see something obvious like a whole bean or a piece of corn, which she didn't, and anyway, she hadn't studied it. I'd like to interject here and say whenever I have vomited, I definitely look at the contents. I don't know why. I'm just curious. I want to know if there's chunks of corn or carrot. I want to know if I'm vomiting up bile or if I'm vomiting up my dinner or whatever caused the vomit. So yes, I do look, but that's just me. Anyway, moving on. More concerning, Rogers pointed out that Erin never mentioned the vomiting to any of the doctors who treated her in the days after. Erin admitted that was true. The prosecution's point here was clear. Was she hiding it, minimising how much she ate, shifting the narrative? Rogers put it to her that she'd said different things at different times, that she hadn't eaten at all, that she'd eaten half, a quarter. Erin brushed it off as an imprecision. I didn't have a tape measure, she said. Shady. From there, the court turned to her movements on the Monday after the lunch. Erin arrived at Leongatha Hospital early that morning, but left again just 10 minutes later. She returned about 90 minutes after that. According to Erin, she needed to go home, feed the pets, get her daughter's ballet things together, deal with the sheep, but the prosecution painted a different picture. Dr. Rogers alleged that Erin left the hospital not to feed the animals, but to come up with a plan, that by then she realised how sick her lunch guests actually were, and that she needed to think fast about how to cover her tracks. Erin denied that. She said she probably did do some thinking during the time, but not about anything sinister. The cross-examination then zoomed in on her interaction with Dr. Chris Webster, the lead doctor at Leongatha that day. According to Erin, he was yelling at her. Later, she realised that that was just his inside voice. But what matters is what he said to her, that death cap mushrooms might be involved, and that she needed to take her kids to the hospital. Did she understand that meant their lives were at risk? Erin seemed unsure. I guess, she said. I was confused. It was around that moment the prosecution argues that everything shifted for Erin, that she finally realised that this wasn't just food poisoning, that this could become a criminal investigation, and that she returned to hospital not because she was sick, but because she needed to look sick. The last part of the cross-examination circled back to the mushrooms again. Dr. Rogers suggested that Erin's interest in death caps wasn't just a passing curiosity about fungi in Gippsland, that she'd deliberately searched iNaturalist, navigated through the mushroom sightings, and visited areas where the mushrooms were reported. Erin denied this, again claiming she didn't remember ever using the site. The prosecution countered that metadata from her computer suggested otherwise, and floated the idea that maybe she'd accessed it from another device. And this back and forth wasn't just about websites. Dr. Rogers tied those searches to Erin's movements, like the exact timing of a visit to the Corumburra Middle pub, just after those iNaturalist searches were allegedly made. Erin tried to dispute the connection, but Rogers wasn't budging. Throughout it all, Erin stayed characteristically precise, sometimes to the point of being pedantic. She corrected the prosecutor on wording, challenged paraphrased quotes, even specified that what had been detected in the beef Wellington was Amanitin, not death caps, a subtle distinction, but one she insisted on. The next day's cross-examination started with a dramatic allegation from the prosecution. Dr. Nanette Rogers stood up and accused Erin Patterson of sending the health department on what she called a wild goose chase. And at the centre of that claim, the elusive Asian grocer that Erin said she'd bought her mushrooms from. According to Dr. Rogers, it never existed. Then we looped back to the leftovers, specifically the mushrooms. Were the children really eating leftovers from the same lunch? Were they made fresh again? Questions about intent were heavy in the air. From there, they got another mention of the enrichment clinic, and the same clinic where Erin claimed she was booked in for a gastric bypass consult. You'll remember that Erin told the court she lied to her lunch guests about having cancer. She claimed the lie wasn't malicious. It was a cover. A cover, she says, for a planned medical procedure she didn't want to talk about yet, gastric bypass surgery. The first time we heard about this supposed surgery was when Erin herself took the stand. The prosecution hadn't been expecting that twist, but they acted fast. By that morning, they secured a fresh statement from the practice manager at Enrich. And what did that statement say? Well, it's damning. According to the clinic's own manager, Enrich does not perform gastric bypass surgery. Not now, not ever, not even pre-assessments for it. What they do, the statement said, is procedures involving skin and appendages. cosmetic stuff, not bariatric surgery. The prosecution then asked Erin directly, "Do you accept that this clinic never offered gastric bypass surgery?" And after some hesitation, she said, "Yes." But if that's the case, then why tell people you were going there for a bypass? And why tell your lunch guests you had cancer? As the prosecution pointed out, there's not a single mention of weight loss surgery in Erin's full medical records, which span a decade. Not one reference. Erin says that's because she felt ashamed. But in a murder trial, vagueness like that does not help. And then we returned again to the beef Wellington. Let's break this down. The cookbook Erin claims she used said to make a Wellington in one large log, but Erin served her guests individual Wellingtons. She was asked, why not just follow the recipe? And why had she bought 1.7 kilos of mushrooms when the recipe only calls for 700 grams? Her answer? She says she ate all the rest. A full kilo of mushrooms, gone in 4 days. Now back to that mysterious Asian grocer. Erin told multiple people she bought the mushrooms from an Asian grocer, but her story about where and what kind of shop kept shifting. Glen Waverley, Mount Waverley, Oakley, Clayton. The suburbs changed depending on who she was talking to, but the prosecution says this wasn't confusion. It was a deliberate misdirection. They argued Erin changed her story halfway through the health department's investigation, wasting critical time and resources while officials searched for a store that may never have existed. And there was more about the packaging. Erin described it in meticulous detail. A Ziploc style bag with a white handwritten sticker, no branding, nothing commercial. The prosecution pushed back hard. How could she remember the bag so clearly, but not the store? Not even the street name. Then, of course, they revisited the quote-unquote smell. Earlier in the trial, Sally Ann Atkinson from the health department recalled Erin telling her that the mushrooms quote-unquote smelled funny while drying. Erin disputed that. She said the smell was strong, not funny, and far from ruining the Wellington. She thought those mushrooms would actually enhance the flavour. We also heard more about the science behind this whole thing, including the analysis done by Dr. Camille Truong. She was the doctor who literally took the leftover Wellington home in a bag and examined it under a microscope. She didn't find any mushroom particles, but the prosecution says that's because Erin had blitzed the mushrooms into a powder, just like she admitted she'd done in the past to sneak mushrooms into her daughter's muffins. Now, if that wasn't enough, the day was ended with a deep dive into the mobile phone tower data. The prosecution presented evidence that Erin's phone pinged off towers near Loch and Outram, two spots where not coincidentally foragers had posted death cap mushroom sightings on the iNaturalist app. Erin denies ever going there to pick mushrooms. She says maybe she drove through there on her way to somewhere else, but she didn't stop. The prosecution doesn't buy it. They say she was in Loch for an hour on April 28th, 10 days after someone posted a sighting of death caps under an oak tree there. They also noted that the same day she purchased a food dehydrator. Coincidence? I think not. Erin didn't deny buying the dehydrator, but she disagreed with everything else. The prosecution even brought up another alleged visit on May 22nd, where her phone pinged at both Loch and Outram. She denied that too, but what stood out was how quick she was to correct the prosecutor when the timing was wrong, not over the content, but over whether it was over an hour or actually 34 minutes. Erin is, if nothing else, detail-oriented. And so with Erin on the stand, still under intense cross-examination, we inch closer to the conclusion of this murder trial. One Ziploc bag, one mushroom, one mobile ping at a time. So there you have it. The cross-examination of Erin Patterson proves very fucking interesting. There's a lot of gaps in Erin's story. It was brave of her to get up on the stand, and I think it was the defense only way of getting a decent alternative story out there, despite all of the evidence the prosecution has laid out in court. On the surface, the explanation Erin provides about the lying and the hiding of evidence being like a fear response, you can kind of understand, but as soon as the prosecution comes in with all of the detailed questions, you quickly realise that things don't add up at all. So I lied, this is going to be 3 parts. Sorry, guys. So in our next episode, we're going to be discussing the closing arguments as well as the verdict. Okay, guys, thanks for listening, and I hope you're enjoying this. If you've got any questions, please hit me up. You can hit up the email, nurseratchetpodcast@gmail.com, or you can DM me on the Instagram. If you've got any requests, chuck them at me. Any comments about previous episodes, hit me up. Make sure you hit the follow button and give us a rating if you don't mind. Every little thing helps, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.